Well, I think we're finally here. The Great Reset has arrived. I don't know how else to look at what's going on right now, other than the intentional evisceration of energy markets in the West by Western leaders. And it's totally deliberate, completely avoidable, and yet here we are. We're reaching a state soon of a completely artificial shortage in energy. Heat will be prohibitively expensive. Fuel for your cars and trucks will be prohibitively expensive. Fertilizer will be prohibitively expensive. Food will be prohibitively expensive in the extent that you'll no longer be eating luxury foods. You'll be lucky just to get your loaf of bread. That's what we're looking at here. And I don't want to be hyperbolic. It's the last thing I want to be. I don't want to think that these things are true. Just last year, or maybe it was the year before, I was talking about how all of this, the green agenda and the Great Reset and all this stuff was just pie in the sky nonsense, because that would completely just destroy people's standards of living. So it's impossible that they could ever do these things, and yet here we are. They're not saying that this is for the Great Reset, but they're destroying our standards of living. That's what's going to happen. Everything's going to be expensive. We're all going to be poor. Whether your income goes down or not, the price of everything is going to go up. At least everything that you need, everything that you consume. And I can't stress this enough, it's being done intentionally. Capital expenditure on oil exploration has been low for, 8 years now, interestingly. Going back to around 2014, the same time that you had the Maidan coup, which is now coming back to bite us. At that point, oil exploration pretty much fell off a cliff, and it hasn't recovered. Then, of course, we had the Keystone Pipeline that was shut down, which would have brought oil down, from Canada down to the Gulf Coast where I live. That oil, of course, being necessary because we no longer do business with the Venezuelans, and from the way I understand it, actually, Tom Luongo was talking about this morning, and I was familiar with what the Gulf Coast uses. I know that down here we need heavy crude for our refineries. I think they're owned by the Koch brothers, if I remember correctly. And I knew that we used to get that oil from Venezuela, and it's been tough for the Koch brothers ever since Venezuela's been kind of cut out, by Washington. What I didn't know is that we were getting the oil for those refineries from Russia now, which is quite ironic. So now we just can't get ahead down here. It seems that the forces are just out, they're just arrayed against us, and for some reason, they just keep taking out oil supplies to the Gulf Coast. But as I look at the broader picture, it's not just my region of the planet that is experiencing this. It's the entire Western world. They're trying to sabotage energy, because that's what they're doing by trying to promote the green crap, which they're not doing right now. They're just saying, "Ooh, Russia bad, so therefore we have to stop using oil." And then, of course, what are they going to replace that oil with? Well, they don't have more oil to replace it with. They're going to have to replace it with green crap that is highly inefficient. And I'm not going to go into that lecture again. I've done it enough. I think I've driven the point home. I think I've beat that horse to death. But we're going to be poor. That's what you need to understand. And the Great Reset crowd, the Davos crowd, expects us all to take that. They think that we're just going to tolerate that we're going to put up with it for the greater good or some nonsense. They think that if they propagandize us enough about Russia and say, have you heard the new line? Oh, it's just a couple more dollars, at the pump, just to stick it to Putin. Every time you stick that gas pump in your car, you're sticking it to Putin, by buying all that Saudi oil from those great human rights champions. That's how you fuel your car with a clean conscience. And then you have this, the clown is the wrong word because he's not funny. Clown in the worst way. Stephen Colbert come out and say, well, I don't care if gas is $15 a gallon because I drive a Tesla. It's like, well, not all of us has a friggin' $250,000 car, buddy. And I don't need to say that. Plenty of people have already said that today. But it's just so infuriating. I can't get past it. I just look at all this. I see these people on TV. And there's no other way to interpret it other than these people hate us. It's not that they're out of touch. It's not that or just that. They are certainly out of touch. It's not that they are well-intentioned and just really stupid. They hate us. They want us to suffer, and they know that's what they're going to do. That's why they're coming out and softening and saying, well, see, by suffering, you're sticking it to Putin. You know, every time that you shed a tear over your lot in life, Putin sheds 2 or 3. You know, you're making his life so bad. It's like, well, you know what? I don't think we should all have to suffer in the Western world. Everyone shouldn't be driven into poverty just to make Putin's life a little less comfortable. Maybe I'm the crazy one, but I'm just not that obsessed with Russia to where I'm willing to destroy my life and the life of everyone else I know, everyone I have ever known, and everyone I will ever know in my life, just to stick it to one man that I have never met. And of course, that's not what we're doing anyway, because it's not like Putin, can't sell his oil to China. I mean, China's huge. They could buy enough oil. China can just say, maybe we won't buy our oil from these other places. Maybe we'll just buy it all from Russia. And they can do that. Or, if Russia really just does export less oil, well, then you have cheaper oil for people in Russia. That seems like a pretty big win. Cheap oil makes your economy more efficient. You can produce more with the same, other resources because you have more energy. The more energy you have, the more you can get done. It's a pretty simple concept. We here in the West, on the other hand, are now going to be left with less energy. I went into this a couple days ago when I first talked about how crazy the Russian oil ban is. And then yesterday it happened. And then I didn't even have time to talk about it yesterday because Victoria Nuland said something even crazier. Which, if you didn't catch that, go back to yesterday and I'll tell you about what Victoria Nuland said about biolabs in Ukraine. And you can click the link in description and watch her yourself. It was astonishing. I'm still astonished. All of this is astonishing because it's just out in the open. I mean, I think that I think that there's a non-zero chance that I'm witnessing what will be the final nail in the coffin of the United States. I think that it is very possible that in the future we look back and see this moment in history as when the U.S. passed the point of no return. Because I hate to break it to you, America's not going to go green. That's not just going to happen. I guess, you could say, well, it would be nice if we could. Sure, it'd be great if we could have free energy forever, but we don't. Fossil fuels aren't my aren't my favorite thing in the world either. I like biofuels. I like growing things. I like farming. That's just, that's what appeals to me personally. That's what makes me feel good, And other people, what makes them feel good are solar panels and wind turbines. But that's not going to sustain humanity's standard of living. It's not going to sustain our standard of living in the West. What has always sustained our standard of living, the reason why we have such a higher standard of living in the West than all the rest of the world, is because of fossil fuels. And when other countries start to catch up with us, places like Japan or China or whatever, as they catch up with us, the reason why they're catching up, or something that is directly correlated with them catching up to us in living standards, it's burning fossil fuels. In fact, Chris Martenson did a great show going over the actual data on this and putting out good charts a week or two ago, I think, on his channel Peak Prosperity. But you don't have to use the data. It's common sense stuff. Everything, the economy, production, it requires energy. You have to power the machines. You have to power the lights. You have to power your vehicles to transport things. All of that takes energy in one form or another. And in order to economize on resources, people use the most efficient forms of energy to power industry. And that just happens to be coal, oil, and natural gas, because they're relatively cheap to produce, i.e. extract from the ground. and they produce, a lot of energy relative to how much it costs us to obtain them. And they're very reliable because, they've been there. Because they're fossils, they're millions of years old. They're not changing. They're not degrading over time. It's not like a battery that you have sitting around that, can go bad. These are natural materials. They're in a state of nature. But if this energy is being choked off, if the supply is being restricted, not only by what's going on with Russia, but also by, the ESG movement, by which is, ESG is really what's responsible for the lack of capital expenditure, oil exploration dollars and all that. Of course, there's also government regulation restrictions on oil exploration and all that. All of these things come together to choke the energy supply. And energy, it's like oxygen. Carbon is to the economy like oxygen is to the human body. As your body works harder, your heart pumps faster, and your lungs work harder trying to put more oxygen into your blood. Your blood has to pump faster to deliver that oxygen throughout your body. You need more oxygen the harder you're working. And the same thing is true for the economy. The more the economy works, the more we produce, the more carbon we need. Now, if you're doing a lot of work and you're outside, let's say you're doing some heavy lifting, you're chopping wood, let's say, and you're breathing real hard, you're using a lot of oxygen, and then somebody comes up and slaps an N95 mask on your face. All of a sudden, your oxygen supply is restricted. You're not able to breathe in as much. You're not able to get as much oxygen flowing to your blood, and no matter how fast your heart is pumping, you just can't do as much as you could before that restriction. All else equal, you're doing less work. You're capable of doing less work. That's obvious. That's what they're doing to our economy right now, and they're doing it on an extreme scale. And they're doing it in a way that will have not just sort of a linear effect across the economy that just, 5% less energy, and so we have a 5% decline in economic output or whatever across the board. No, we don't understand entirely, the way different things, the interplay in the economy. It's very complicated. You'll have different things. You'll have things fail at different rates. You'll have different businesses that might go under, and then that'll have domino effects and knock over different things, and we have no idea how much damage and what the nature of the damage will be as a result of all this. This is just creating chaos. And this chaos is going to destabilize much of the West. If you think back to the Arab Spring, what spurred that was a spike in grain prices. Food became expensive, people became unruly, and it led to a regime change across the Middle East, because it inflamed the tinderbox of these countries, because these people already had lots of grievances with the government, but they weren't going to, get out all up in arms and out in the streets over them, as long as they were fat and happy, or at least as long as they were able to have their basic needs met. There just wasn't enough incentive there. But as people's lives become more difficult, as their standard of living declines, they have less and less to lose, and they say, you know what, I'm fed up. And they get out there, and you get instability. I predicted this at the early on when it came to the lockdowns. That was going to have a very bad effect on our economy and social psychology and whatever. And what do you know? That very summer, we happened to get a lot of riots in America. The riots were not explicitly about, being locked down or whatever, but I think it was pretty safe to infer that had a lot to do with it, that is what changed the psychology in America and helped make people much more agitated. Likewise, the reaction to what is going on now in energy markets and the rapid decline in our standards of living in the West that we will be experiencing over the next few months, potentially years. It may not be, directly linked to that. People might not be waving signs saying, hey, bread is too expensive. But this is going to be what raises the temperature in the tinderbox. Economic devastation will ignite a lot of the existing grievances that we have here in America and in other countries. I can't speak, intelligently about other countries because I don't know necessarily about their specific problems. But here in America, we have intense political divisions. People will obviously blame the political opposition, or I should say, they'll blame the people who don't have their politics for what is about to transpire. Hell, that happened in 2008. Everyone wanted to blame all the economic problems on either Bush or Obama or whatever, even though, presidents don't really have direct influence over these things. Of course, in this case with Biden, there's a pretty good case that he's having a very real and direct impact on what is going to be the next depression. And I think that there will be movements by states to try and circumvent the federal energy policy in the coming years. I think, but the problem is these things take time. It's not something that can be fixed overnight. But I don't know what other choice people will have. They're going to have to go around federal regulators and say, you know what, no, we're drilling anyway, because we need fuel. We need to live. We need to drive. You know how big America is? You know how many people, live very far away from things? Everything's very spread out in this country. Especially, you go to like a state like Texas, which is massive, it can take you 5 hours to drive from, one town to another. Think about somebody living in Austin who has to go do something down in Houston. How are they going to get there without, if a diesel is $10 a gallon or gas is $10 a gallon or something like that? I think about living in Florida. If I had to make, if I have a business in Miami and I have to make the trip down there, and gas is, $10 a gallon. It's insane. People won't tolerate it. People won't live that way. If there is, promise of a solution, if there is this perception that energy supplies are being artificially restricted, that energy prices are being kept artificially high, people will take that, they will see that as a direct threat to themselves. They'll see it as a direct threat or as a direct attack on their lives. I guarantee you, if we continue down this path, you will see states nullifying federal laws governing energy exploration, not just oil, but also coal and natural gas, whatever they can get at, anything. Personally, I'm a big fan of oil palms. I would like to see oil palms, genetically engineered to try and maximize the amount of output. In the same way that, corn was bred over much of human history to have these giant kernels that are edible, or these, these big cobs. Corn used to be much smaller. I think if we had some of these oil crops that, unlike soybeans or corn, which are very inefficient when it comes to trying to make oil, oil palms produce a lot of oil to begin with, so I think it would be great to pursue something like that. Personally, one of my goals, but of course, I'm young, I haven't been able to implement this, would be to have a small, I don't know what you'd call it, an orchard or a grove, I guess a grove of oil palms on my own property that I could harvest for my own fuel supply. Supposedly, a well-maintained grove of oil palms can produce up to or around 650 gallons of oil per year. That kind of oil from a palm tree like that could be, if I have the small scale equipment to try and extract it from the fruit, could very well power older diesel engines, which were originally designed to run on crude oil. That's what the diesel design and principles were all about. It was about burning crude oil because we didn't have standardized refined fuel in the early days of the internal combustion engine. Gasoline engines, they were just an engine based on the principle of running, trying to run off of vapors from oil. Diesel was about, compression ignited oil engines. And then we came up with these concepts of gasoline or diesel fuel later on that were specially designed for these engines. But at a time like this, it would be very, and I think it's something that not enough people talk about, it would be very much worth your while to have your own, off-the-grid, self-sustained, like homesteaded fuel supply. And if you think about it, 650 gallons, I don't know how much, that could, if you've got that and you're one person, that's a pretty good head start. I mean, I don't know how much you would use more than, I don't know how much fuel the average person uses a year, but 650 gallons is a good head start. That'll save you a lot of money on fuel, and if, things get like they're going to get, that would really come in handy. 1 acre of land, if you live in a rural area, it's not that much space. Hell, you could do 2 acres if you need too much of your property. There are these people who have these, very intense homesteads where they try and grow all their own food or whatever, and they don't think about fuel. And I don't think it's a solution for everyone in America to maintain 1 or 2 acres of oil palm trees to grow their own fuel. I'm not saying that, although I do think that would be a good idea. But, we're in a time when we're going to need radical solutions to solve this stuff. And people can't just go along with what the Washington line is going to be. I mean, you've got people like Stephen Colbert saying, I don't care about the price of oil, I drive a Tesla, as if energy prices don't affect electricity. These people think that electricity just, comes from magic. I mean, maybe if you have a solar panel, you can be somewhat insulated from energy costs. That is until you need a new solar panel, in which you have to rely on the supply chains for that, which are quite fragile. And of course, solar panels have to be shipped across the ocean on oil-burning freighters, ships from China. And all of the, of course, all of the fossil fuels that are involved in having to produce a solar panel, the massive environmental toll of rare earth mining in China. So, today's discussion kind of got off the rails. I don't really know where I was going with this, but I'm trying to rack my brain and comprehend in my head, like, the reality that we're coming into. And, it's just like, it doesn't really feel real yet. It doesn't feel like that this could really happen, that they could just because there's nothing more important than energy markets. I always said interest rates are the most important price in the economy, and that's true, from a structural standpoint. But from a basic, maintaining basic living standards standpoint, the price of energy, and of oil in particular, much more important. Interest rates are the most important price over time because it dictates the direction of investment in the economy and how people invest in the economy and, the sustainability of the economy. But oil determines whether or not you're going to live or die today. Because really, if we don't have enough energy to sustain the human population, people are going to starve to death. They're going to die. We need fossil fuels to make fertilizer. We need fossil fuels to grow the food, to power the tractors. Otherwise, we'd have to do it all by hand. The reason why there are so few farmers as a percentage of the population in America is because we have all of these fossil fuel-driven machines that do the work for us, so that the rest of us can go live in cities or whatnot, or deliver DoorDash in an exurb. So anyway, I'm going to keep developing this. I'm going to have to keep thinking about this to think where this is going, because there's so much here. This is going to be the biggest story of the next decade or so, at the very least, until something changes. And the thing is, there's no quick fix to this. It's not like it's as simple as, oh, well, we're just going to drill for our own oil. Like, that takes years. Even, like my oil palm, I was just thinking of, I think it takes like 5 or 6 years for those trees to ever even start producing fruit. And who knows when they peak. I haven't looked that deeply into it. It's just something that I've thought about, hey, that's something I would want to do when I have, if I get to a point in my life when I can afford a little land. Right now, can't afford shit. But hell, if we want to talk about drilling for oil, I don't know, maybe the Keystone Pipeline thing is something that could happen fast. But how much oil is that capable of delivering? Russia exports 5 million barrels a day, or at least that's what they were doing before all this started. If you cut 5 million barrels a day out, where's that going to come from? Venezuela's not going to produce that. Iran's not going to produce that. America can't produce that, certainly not in the next, in the next couple months. Even if you had, the most pro-oil and anti-Davos president ever in office. It's just not going to happen. We would have to build new refineries or retool the old refineries that are designed for heavy crude. Because I look at it, if we start, pumping more oil or whatever, unless we have the kind of oil that we can process down in Houston, where the Koch brothers have their refineries, I still am not going to have access to fuel, because I believe that's all the fuel where I am comes from those refineries, because I live along the Gulf Coast. Florida, we certainly don't have oil refineries that I know of, so I think we still get them from Texas, because we have you have the tankers that come across the Gulf of Mexico and into Tampa Bay. And to my knowledge, that's where all of the oil in Florida comes from. When petroleum-based companies, petrochemical type people. I mean, all of those companies are in Tampa. So in a way, I think that where I am, we're in a worse position probably than most of America, because where are we going to find heavy crude? Unless things are somehow rekindled magically with Venezuela overnight, I don't see that happening. I don't see Venezuela flipping over to America's side after everything that America's done to Venezuela. Whether you support or oppose what they did, it's just there's no there can be no illusions about the bad blood between the Maduro regime and the regime in Washington. So anyway, I need to quit. This is where I'll end it for today. We'll continue talking about this mess tomorrow.